Good morning, everybody. The Simple Handicap for Wednesday, September 11th. Thank you for making me a part of your morning. Hope your Wednesday is off to a fantastic start. I do know a large portion of the listening audience hails in the New York and New Jersey area. This is obviously a very significant day for some and really many listening. So if this is a day that obviously has an impact on you or your family, and hopefully the day is going by as well as it could, just wanted to acknowledge and hopefully have this podcast as a bit of a distraction if you are one of those folks going through it today. So just wanted to bring that up before we get into the podcast. Today's market rundown, hopefully be a little bit shorter than Monday and Tuesday. I know we've gone pretty long on the last two episodes. We've got a major preview going on at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern time on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can subscribe down below and hit the reminder. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, you can jump over, join in the live chat. Really good community around the show. Last week's preview was very popular and watched by a ton of bettors. Hopefully this week and every week on continues to grow and get even bigger. So we'll get you through the market rundown today and get you on your way this Wednesday morning and hopefully see you back for the preview at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Just before we get to the first game, want to remind everybody at raspicks.com/NFL, the remainder of the NFL season has been reduced to $5.95. We've already sent out 4 releases this week. Potential for more to come. If you're interested in following along with all of the bets, you can head over to raspicks.com/NFL. Week 2 kicks off tomorrow night with the Buffalo Bills on the road to South Florida to take on the Miami Dolphins. This game is sitting at 2 minus 115 at Chris, 2 minus 115 at FanDuel, flat 2 everywhere else across the board, with the one exception being Circa at 2.5 minus 110. It's been back and forth between 1.5 and 2.5 all week. The news that you need to kind of keep an eye on in this game that we'll get later today, this morning, probably around 9:45 a.m. Pacific time, will be the news around Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane, 2 running backs from Miami, will play a big part of this offense. There is Jalen Wright waiting in the wings. There's also Jeff Wilson. So it's not like the Dolphins are void of running backs. There was an interesting quote from Jeff Wilson yesterday where he said he expects both guys to be on the field. Delicate kind of situation for how Miami is handling this. Backups are certainly more than replacement level, but you also have 2 stars that are on the injury report that have yet to practice so far this week. So something to keep an eye on. Josh Allen is going to be a full go. He's been practicing with a protective glove on his non-throwing hand. Not really as big of a story as it seemed that it might be on Monday morning as he heads into this game fully healthy. But Teron Johnson will obviously not be in the backfield for Buffalo. A big loss for their secondary. And you wonder if the Dolphins are going to put up a pretty big test if they can be a little bit sharper in this matchup. A big change in opponent going from the Arizona Cardinals, who want to run the football and keep everything inside and be physical, to this speed attack of the Miami Dolphins for this Bills defense to worry about. Moving on to the games on Sunday, it's Las Vegas on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. Early start for Las Vegas. Going across the country, we're seeing the first 10s on the board as of late yesterday afternoon. Chris is at 10. Buckeye is at 10. BetOnline is at 10. When you see those books go to 10 and there's some others lagging behind, we know 9 is really an irrelevant number when it comes to NFL betting. Kind of a good indication of how this market has been going so far. Lamar Jackson should be at practice today. We never really know what's going on. He was a DNP on Monday. Again, we're waiting to see the full status of him and if he is going to be good to go. But this number certainly leaning towards 10, with the majority of the sharper sportsbooks on the board pulling that number up. The total down from 43.5 to 41.5. It's been under money all week long. LA Chargers on the road at the Carolina Panthers. This one just keeps on moving. LA Chargers out to 6.5-point favorites, minus 115 at BetOnline, leaning towards the 7. Total has been one-way money on the under 42, now down to as low as 38.5 at FanDuel, 38.5 at DK as well. We're seeing 39 showing at Chris, Circa, Buckeye, and BetOnline. So this is one-way money on the under. Fun handicap that we'll dive into a lot during the preview. Carolina loses a key defensive lineman last week. There's just nothing there on this Panthers defense at the moment. The real question then is, how do you gauge if that's what they actually are versus the Saints? Was that a bad matchup? Can Carolina defend the same thing they saw from the Saints matched up against the LA Chargers? And then from the Chargers side, big film takeaway that I've seen Monday and Tuesday so far from people I respect is that offense was very boom or bust. Very clean operation. Offensive line was dominant, but it was a couple big runs disguising a lot of down-to-down success. How high is too high with the LA Chargers? New Orleans on the road at the Dallas Cowboys. This number's been holding steady all week long. Still 6.5 from left to right across the screen. Total down from 46 to 45.5 at Chris, but everywhere else is 46 across the board. Optimistic outlook for Jake Ferguson after it looked like that could be a longer-term injury. Sounds like he has an outside chance of playing this week. Marshawn Lattimore is very much a day-to-day watch on the injury report, dealing with a hamstring injury. If you take Lattimore out of that defense, CeeDee Lamb's certainly going to have a very big day. But as it is, when you're looking at week one, which performance was more real? Both of these teams overperformed, but are you giving the Cowboys a bit of a nod to having a better performance relative to expectation, whereas the Saints benefited from playing a perfect matchup for them? This is another very fun handicap that continues to take shape, but Marshawn Lattimore's injury certainly one to watch for in this matchup. Tampa Bay on the road at the Detroit Lions. It's still line 7 across the board. Total is as high as 52. This continues to be one-way action at BetOnline, shaded to the over at 52. Pinnacle has hit 52 as well. We're seeing the same thing at Jazz and Heritage. 51.5 at Chris, Circa, and Buckeye, but leaning towards the 52. As it stands, it looks like Tampa Bay will be down 4 defensive backs, including star safety Antoine Winfield for this game. Doesn't look promising for that secondary, but is this Lions offense going to be able to capitalize downfield? Where we were market rating-wise for this game, where we were numbers-wise for this game a year ago when the two teams played, way lower than what we're looking at 52 on the board right now. These injuries certainly making a big impact into this game, but this is a long way from where the total was expected to be, and it's already adjusted up 4 points since open. Indianapolis on the road at the Green Bay Packers. Still Indy 3, minus 120 across the board. Total in this game is 41. There was a release that was sent out on the Green Bay Packers, somewhat unofficially, from a very popular show and a very popular Telegram channel. That was, for the most part, at 3.5. And that's been kind of steady. Anytime we've seen this get to 3.5, there's been Green Bay money. At 3, there's been interest in the Colts. We heard Juju Brents yesterday, done for the season. He was the one bright spot in the Colts secondary. You think about the Packers wide receiver group and how they can test an opposing secondary. But is Malik Willis going to be the guy who can do that? Lots to talk about and look at in this game, but it does seem like Willis is going to be the starting quarterback, and the pursuance of Ryan Tannehill was just a couple-day rumor, which maybe implies that Jordan Love is healthier than anticipated and has the chance to return sooner. I don't really know what to make of that scenario, but you would have to think if they're not going to pursue Ryan Tannehill, that's possibly a positive for the Green Bay Packers kind of midterm outlook and getting him back. But this is a very interesting game that's been hanging on 3 for the whole week. Cleveland on the road at the Jacksonville Jags. This Jacksonville 3, minus 120 across the board. Total went down later yesterday evening, down to a flat 41 for the first time this week at Chris. Saw 41 at BetOnline as well. Lots of 41.5s, but they are shaded to the under. There's still questions about what's going on with Deshaun Watson at the moment. Obviously, the new lawsuit was brought up. He had 2 family tragedies over the weekend, losing what he referred to as his brother and former teammate. He lost his dad, which, according to reports, he wasn't super close with, but nevertheless, he said post-game that it impacted him, and now you have this extra drama added in this week, becoming a very messy situation for Cleveland. The big player news that you have to watch for injury report-wise is at both tackle positions. Will Jack Conklin be back? Will Jedrick Wills give it a go? Against the Dallas Cowboys last week, this makeshift offensive line, without the league's best offensive line coach who left in the offseason, looked completely lost and allowed the second highest pressure rate of any team to an opposing defense. And so those two guys are absolutely key to watch as this Browns team continues to unravel a bit here in the early portion of the season. San Francisco on the road at the Minnesota Vikings. As anticipated, the 49ers are back to a 6-point spread across the board. We're kind of speculating on this during the Monday evening show, Tuesday morning show, where the Monday Night Football game was still not widely available. So yesterday on the podcast, we were trying to figure out where that number was going to land, and it is, in fact, back at 6, and haven't seen much movement on that. The total reopened 45.5 and has been shaded a little bit to the under. Didn't get to talk about this game a whole lot yesterday as it wasn't fully open. It is a rematch of last year in the October game where San Francisco went to Minnesota like they are in this spot. They took on Brian Flores, who tried to blitz Brock Purdy a ton. Purdy had a ton of success, 15 for 19 against the blitz, held up very well. Both quarterbacks had a phenomenal game. Cousins on the other side for Minnesota. Now you take him out, you put Sam Darnold in, and as you're looking at this line, it's really a question of how real was that Minnesota offensive performance against a very bad Giants secondary, because we know it's a big step up in class here against the 49ers defense, which looked rejuvenated under Nick Sorensen. So is there a little bit of a revenge? Is there a little bit of defensive addition and upgrade for the 49ers? Perhaps the Vikings a little bit inflated. Interesting to see where this number goes, but there's certainly been intrigue to the under so far in the early going of the market, and I think that's just purely based off of what we saw from the 49ers defense. Question marks about Christian McCaffrey in this game. It does seem like there is a chance he will not play, and that seems to be growing day by day. Nothing confirmed yet. We'll get more news on that as we go throughout the week, but that could potentially be a concern and lead into why this total is ticking down just a little bit so far on speculation. What I can say is that looking back at last game, as I went back, watched YouTube highlights, followed up on some Reddit forums, looked at some old Twitter searches, Minnesota played a ton of too high looks, although they weren't a bunch of man against the Giants. Looks like that are where Deebo Samuel thrives. And so when we're thinking about prop markets and what we can potentially look at if there's no CMC, we saw Deebo involved in the run game a lot against the Jets, but this would be a Flores defense, which he would probably incorporate it in quite a bit, both in the run and the pass game. So it could set up to be a very big Deebo Samuel game if that is, in fact, how things transpire with the 49ers injury report. Seattle, across the country, to the second longest flight that you can make in an NFL game. They will be taking on the New England Patriots. 3 minus 120 is the number across the board. Total from 41 down to 38. Still waiting on the status of Kenneth Walker in this game. That'll be the big deciding factor for how much you're going to get out of the Seattle Seahawks offense. Major injury to watch and see what his status is. Twitter doctors, the collection of them so far, seem to believe that he is going to play, but it sounds like there is going to be at least some performance impact if he is out there dealing with the abdomen injury. So that's something to watch as the Seahawks lost George Fant off the offensive line as they're still trying to figure things out up front. New York Jets on the road at the Tennessee Titans. 4 was the reopen. It is now down to 3.5 and shaded towards 3. Total from 43.5 on the reopen, all the way down as low as 40.5. A full field goal move to the under. Talked about the quote yesterday where the Titans head coach Brian Callahan said he would have been better off if he just called a punt on 1st and 10 every single series. Pretty damning comment in regards to your offense. I will say at 40.5, I may be a little bit surprised to see how far down this has moved, because the one big question with the Jets was, what are we going to get from Aaron Rodgers? I thought he looked much better than expected in that game against a very good 49ers defense. Should totals really be this short if Aaron Rodgers is going to be that effective? Something to keep in mind as we continue to look at this game. Giants on the road at the Washington Commanders. Washington, a 1-point favorite now, as there was a release from a prominent service yesterday on the New York Giants. Yes, pros are still back in the New York Giants, even after week 1. We saw that number come in quite a bit off the release. It's now Washington, a 1 or 1.5-point favorite across the board. We released the over at 42 earlier in the week. This number is still showing 44 at most spots on the board. LA Rams on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona still a 1-point favorite across the board. Total in this game is 48.5, shaded to the over. Could see Arizona money continuing to come into the market between now and the weekend. I think we do see another move on Arizona. When you're looking at the Rams injury report, we know Puka's not going to be out there at wide receiver, but we're waiting to get final confirmation on 4 offensive linemen. And when you think about where the Rams struggled specifically against the Lions offense last week, I think the Arizona Cardinals can replicate that same type of game plan. And if you can't run it consistently on Arizona like we saw Buffalo do, that gives their secondary a little bit of an out. So matchup-wise, this is kind of going to be a bit tough for the Rams if they have those offensive line injuries up front. And they are, in fact, down 4 guys. They've already gone and signed people to the roster, which would be an indication you're very unlikely to see Avila, you're very unlikely to see Noteboom, you're very unlikely to see at least one of the other guys on the injury report as well. So keep an eye on those injuries today as we get the first report officially out of the LA locker room. Cincinnati on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. It's been a slow drip of Cincinnati money into the market. By now, you guys have probably seen the Joe Burrow clip trying to pick up the Gatorade bottle. I don't know if that was a doctored video or a meme. I'm getting old. I fall for stuff online. I don't know. It was a weird video to watch, is all I will say. Now, T. Higgins sounds very pessimistic about playing in this game. It seems unlikely we will see him out there, but it does seem more likely that Jamar Chase is going to be a full go. He labeled himself limited last week. This is not a confirmed source. This is speculating to see what we'll get. We'll obviously get the full report today and see how they're handling that, but I would expect to see more from Chase in this game in terms of being closer to 100%. Red Angle Sports, we released the over in this game at 46.5. Just think it's tough to justify a Chiefs total where Hollywood Brown could potentially be back. Andy Reid said it's looking good. Tough to justify a Chiefs total with him back against the Bengals defense that is much worse than the Ravens at the same price as what they were against the Ravens. And so we'll see how this number continues to hold up a full point since release. Pittsburgh on the road at the Denver Broncos. The Steelers are in line to start Justin Fields. Mike Tomlin said yesterday they are preparing as if Justin Fields is going to start. Interesting decision, not giving Russ the return revenge game, so to speak, going back against Sean Payton and the Denver Broncos. On that news, this number has come in a little bit as there was not one but two other service releases going against us on the Denver Broncos at 3 minus 10 as well as 3.5 minus 10. And this is now sitting 3 even money. Total is down a full 4 points from open 40.5 down to 36.5. Chicago Bears on the road at the Houston Texans for a very fun Sunday night football coming up. Texans got to 7 flat before there was Chicago money showing on the screen. It is now 7 minus 109 at Chris, 7 even money at Buckeyes, 7 minus 103 at Bet Online. Total 46.5 down to 45.5. A bit surprised to see that under money come in after what the Houston Texans did on the field. But there was very real professional money late on Sunday supporting the Houston Texans from a major group, and we're seeing the Houston Texans get bet again early this week with this number climbing up on top of another key number as well for the second week in a row. And then it is Monday Night Football, the Atlanta Falcons on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles, 2 points up from the open to 6.5 for Philadelphia, left to right across the screen. Total 47.5 down to 47, shaded under minus 115 at Chris, 47 everywhere else except for Pinnacle, which is 46.5 minus 113 to the over. That reads a lot like that 47 shaded under at Chris, considering the VIG structure at Pinnacle. Could see a scenario where there's possibly under money if this comes off of the 47. So I think it's hard to ignore what the Eagles offense did in Brazil, as well as their defensive issues in the secondary. I know Atlanta wasn't pretty, and there's Kirk Cousins injury speculation aplenty. However, there were 3 turnovers for Atlanta in Pittsburgh territory. And when you look at the down-to-down play-by-play stuff for Atlanta, wasn't all that terrible relative to how that game is viewed. So we might have some intrigue on the over if this does, in fact, get off of the number of 47. That'll do it from me today on the podcast. I hope to see each and every one of you over on the live stream on the RAS Picks YouTube channel, 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Join the live chat. Follow along. It's a great show, and I hope everybody enjoys it. If you're already watching on the YouTube channel this morning here on the podcast, the subscribe button is down below. I would appreciate it if you enjoyed the content at all, that you hit that button and continue to follow the channel. Have a fantastic Wednesday, everybody. See you on the preview. If not, you'll get the podcast uploaded on the podcast feed on Apple and Spotify after I'm done the preview. We'll talk to you tomorrow morning here on the show.